Look out in the street there. You know what you don't see? My car, because I had to sell it to pay the lawyer I hired when I got busted for drunk driving. You know what else you don't see? My girlfriend, who decided that a guy with no car and no license and no money was no fun. And hey, you know what else you don't see? You don't see me leaving for work in the morning, because I missed so much time with court and everything that I got fired.
Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Conscious Talk Radio, and I'm your host, Linda Summers, and these shows are about relationships and all that encompasses. And the guest experts on the show will be providing you with information as to how you can become more connected with yourself. And today's topic is how to live a fuller life through the interaction of horses with Mindy Chernoff. Before we bring Mindy on board, I want to give you some background information about her. Mindy is the founder of Resonant Horse, an innovative approach to healing using horses as teachers and catalysts for change and transformation. For over 50 years, she has immersed herself in the horse's environment and psyche. Mindy recognizes how horses can aid in facilitating a sense of presence, authenticity, and congruence in people. Within the safe environment of the barn, along with the horse, she helps children and adults identify areas of resistance, fear, discomfort, love, and compassion. In addition, the Resonant Horse facilitates executives in leadership development and success both on and off-site. Employing the non-predatory power of horses can pave the way to courage, feeling, healing, and living fully. Mindy, together with horses, heals, lives, and aids, all in becoming fully present, authentic, and fully alive. And with that, I'd love to welcome Mindy to the show. Hi, Mindy.
Hi, Linda. Great to be with you.
And it's so wonderful to have you on the show. And, you know, the funny thing is I have heard so much about how horses can heal, and I have a friend who actually works with horses in therapy, and I've never really understood it. So this, to me, is completely amazing of how healing, change, transformation. So that's what I really want to talk about in all of this.
There's so much, Linda. There's so many different ways we can go. I mean, I can just start. You can butt in and say, I want to know more about this, about that. You know, centuries ago, horses were indispensable for our lives. We needed them to plow. We needed them to get around. Our very sense of how we move is all about horsepower. But today, we don't need them for that reason. We need them to get in touch with who we most truly are, because they're so authentic and they're so genuine, and they're always present in the moment. So right there, we have 3 reasons to hang out with horses, to become better equipped to live our lives by following the wisdom of the horse.
So when did we really recognize that horses can actually heal and there's change and transformation? When did we actually realize that? Was it after the fact when we didn't need them for plowing?
I think it probably goes back centuries to the Indians. You know, we all know the Indians had such an incredible connection with their horses. The Arabs, the Bedouins, they sleep with their horses. So it's so hard to really know when did that shift really happened. But certainly within the last 75, 100 years, I think people have realized that the evolutionary history of the horses is still unfolding for us today. And the invitation for the horses have always been there, but we have gotten to the point where we are realizing just how magnificent and special and incredibly healing they really are.
Yeah. So let's talk about how is that, because you talk about them being so present, so authentic. How is that, since we look at that as an animal, right, and we're human, so how is it
exactly.
that
So when we see how horses live their lives, it can impact our lives. So horses are very large animals. They're masters of non-predatory power. What does that mean? They don't have big claws and sharp teeth. So they aren't predators in the sense that we would think of a lion or a tiger or something like that. But they're very powerful animals. Here's the key, Linda. They use their power in nonverbal ways. because they can't, because they're not predators, when they had to alert their other herd mates, there's a lion in the bush, we have to know if we can flee or if it's safe, they had to be able to alert their other herd mates using nonverbal behavior. And that's what gets incredibly enlarged within horses. And when we follow that, in other words, for humans, we're very verbal. There's a lion out there, get away, let's run. Well, you can't do that with horses. So there's other ways of noticing. And as you know, how many guests do you have on your show that talk about noticing and being mindful, right? Right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
This is what horses help us to do. They help us to notice. So here's how a horse lives, okay? They notice something, they feel, they respond or react, and then they go back to grazing. They go back to a satiated state. So let's apply that to us, okay? Do we notice?
Yes.
Are we able to see what is going around the outside of us, and how about the inside of us? Are we able to monitor our interior state enough to know what we're feeling, right? Some of us feel too much and overreact. Some of us might not feel enough and are frozen, right? And then do we have the tools to respond or react in a healthy way? A lot of us are so caught up in drama that we might overreact to get tied and attached to the drama. And some of us might just freeze. We can't move. We're so paralyzed by fear. So learning, watching how the horse lives, that can help us to live a life in greater freedom. So do horses, once they respond or react, they go back to grazing. They go back to a satiated state. Do we do that? Do we go back to a satiated state? Do we ever get to the point where our heart rate is lowered and our blood pressure is lowered in a way that we can live in a content state? That's what horses do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just find it so fascinating, yeah.
And when you see how a horse, I'll give you a prime example. I was in my barn the other day, and I have about 8 acres. It's just enough of a big enough property for me. And one of my horses was in the back, and he was eating hay out of the manger, and he was standing pretty close to me. And way in the distance, about, a quarter of a mile away, there was the neighbor's property, and somebody was trimming hedges, and they had a radio blaring really loud. Well, my property, it's very quiet, it's very still. We don't have loud radios blaring. So my horse took notice, stopped eating, put his head up, looked over at the sound, and was alerted and alarmed. Because, again, remember, he's primed for fight or flight. He had to be able to look to see where it was coming from. Do I need to flee? In that instant, Linda, his heart rate went up, his blood pressure went up. He was in a stressed state. And here's what he did, which I found was so fascinating. He looked up, and he had that look that, am I going to run? He didn't run, though, Linda. What he did is he moved about 5 feet, very animated, stopped again, and looked again. He had to see, do I have to worry about this? Do I have to flee? And in that instant, I thought was so amazing, Linda, because he went, he saw, he noticed, right? He certainly had a feeling reaction. He was getting close to the flight reaction, but he moved a few feet away. He went to get a different perspective. He went to get a different angle. How many of us, when we're going through something, if we could just stop and notice enough to get a different angle or perspective in non-judgment, oh my gosh. Wow. And then after that, he determined that was not something he had to flee from. He got used to the sound, and he went back to grazing. And I thought, oh my, I just had a real-life demonstration of how someone goes from a highly stressed state to a satiated state in 2 or 3 minutes. But see, we humans, we don't return to our state of satiation. We stay in that high stress. And that's the gift of horses. They can bring us back to ourselves, our true selves, in a way that is calming and reassuring and it gives us hope. It's so great. It's wonderful. It's just such a gift. Such a gift.
It is. And it's just amazing because it's like, and how when you're using that analogy, well, I mean, it was very real, of how, like you said, like we don't. So what are some tips that we can actually do? I mean, I know we've talked about like just taking notice and stepping back, but, you know, when someone's in that place, what would you suggest? Because you're working with people, adults and children as well.
Absolutely. My demographics, I mean, Linda, you name the demographics, they're here. You know, I have from young children, preteen, all the way to people in their 60s and 70s, post-traumatic stress. I mean, there's a lot of that. You know, this is a very difficult day and age for us to live in. We have more technologically and socially than we ever had, but we're so disconnected. And I think one of the gifts that the horses give us is they allow us to be connected. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that in your day-to-day life, there's ways that you can connect with people and be present to what's actually right in front of you. You know, a lot of times we're so busy living in the past or we're busy living in the future, and we forget about the present. And I know this is, you know, what I'm sharing with you is not, most of it, Linda, isn't going to be new news. It's just reframing what you already know. So if we can notice, that's the first part. And the way we notice is we have to stop. We have to stop and we have to be still. You simply cannot live, you know, is it Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living? We have to stop our movement in order to be present to what's going on in our lives. So that's the first piece. When we stop, we need to breathe. We need to be in touch with our body. The amazing thing, horses are in touch with their mind and their heart and their gut. What a gift that is. For us, if we can do 2 out of those 3, we're doing good, right?
Right? I know. Oh my gosh. Or we can do 1 of those.
Right. Yeah. So being able, because, you know, a lot of your listeners might never even see a horse or be near a horse farm, and that's totally okay, because we can bring that wisdom to your audience. So once we stop and once we notice, we feel. And somebody who I adore very deeply is Dr. Dan Gottlieb, who's a therapist here on the East Coast. And what he said to me once, he said, Mindy, when you're suffering, you need to feel felt. And I thought, how profound is that? Because for me, the Resonant Horse, while I've had threads of the Resonant Horse my entire life, it really came to the forefront after a real serious time of suffering for me when I ended a very long-term marriage of 34 years. And that's a long time to end the marriage. Adult children, it was so incredibly difficult, Linda, and painful. And for your listeners, and so many have walked that journey and that path, just sometimes putting one foot in front of the other was all I could do. But I had these animals that I had to tend to. So every day, no matter where my level of suffering, I won't say whether or not I was suffering, because I was suffering. I'll say wherever my level of suffering was at, I went outside and I deeply tended to these animals. And it's almost like they were silent sentries to my suffering, you know? But they really weren't silent, because they're so genuine, and if you're able to live with an open heart, even if you're suffering, that actually changes their neurons. You know, they've done studies showing how a horse's has this electromagnetic field that's really large, much larger than ours, and it actually influences our heart rate. They have studies that have shown this. This isn't just, you know, researchers have proven. Yeah, the HeartMath Institute, the Institute of HeartMath has done studies so that when we're in the presence of these animals, a lot of times it can introduce a state of satiation and calmness. And it works both ways. If I come to a horse, if my clients come to me, very nervous and upset, just doing something simple, being with the horses, possibly stroking them, can serve to bring them back to a satiated state.
Right. Do you think that's because they're taking their mind, it seems like because they're taking their mind off of what they were in pain about, and now they're connecting to something that's different? And, you know, and because it seems like immediately you would start, when you start petting an animal, especially a horse, or any animal, that your thought kind of goes away of what you were really suffering about.
Yes. And they have, research has proven, and whether it's dogs or cats, I mean, we all know pet therapy and animal therapy is so huge.
Yeah.
It works with them, too. The difference with horses is it's 1,250 pounds. So you have this massively large animal that is so quiet and safe. One of my clients came out, and her exercise was just to walk around the horse, not even touch him, Linda. And she said, I felt so soothed. Now, you know, keep in mind, we're not talking about, you know, somebody who has a real fear of horses or something like that. Obviously, if that's the case, these are people that would come and we would do some prerequisite work before we went and interacted with the horses. But I'm talking for people who are open and curious, because that's another thing. You know, horses are so open and curious. And when we are that way as well, that changes our world. We create our world, Linda. You have enough experts on this show that talk about that we create our reality. And when you live your life with an open heart, okay, and your mind is curious, and your body is present, that's how you change the world. That's how you change, one connection at a time.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I kind of want to go back to, you know, when you talked about suffering and feeling pain, and I know you know this as well, that when we, people are in a state of emotional pain, that we tend to work harder, longer. We tend to have a different advice, right, that we tend to go to, because no one wants to feel that pain. Because immediately, even if we do stay in that pain, it becomes too discomfort, you know, and it's like, I'm going to be here, so I'm going to get my way out of that.
Right.
You know? So what are your thoughts on that? How do people
I think so many different things, Linda. You know, I think it really depends on the individual and their lens. Some people need to be sharing that story and the pain they're in. Some people share it so much they're almost stuck. So I can't, it's really hard for me to give you a blanket, well, this is how, but what I will tell you is that whatever the lens you bring here to the horse, wherever you are in your experience of suffering, they allow us to be present to it in a stillness and a softness that allows things to percolate, if that makes sense. And you know, here's the deal. What I'm describing is, in some ways, you're asking me to describe the undescribable. Because, but you know what? I've got a great example. Can I give you an example?
Yes, I would love that. Yes.
I want to give you an example. I don't drive downtown Philly much. I was downtown in Philly, and I was pulling into a parking place. And these parking places have these kiosks where you put in money, and then you have like a little sticker that you put in your dashboard. Maybe you guys have them out where you are. And then you go in and you do whatever. Well, I did that, and I had about an hour and a half or 2 hours on my sticker, but I was only in this appointment for 15 minutes, right? So I got in my car, and I pulled out the sticker, and I thought, I'm looking around to see if somebody is getting ready to pull in, because then I could offer them my sticker. So sure enough, there's a gentleman that pulls in. He gets out to go to the kiosk, and I hop out, and I said to him, are you going to be here about an hour and a half? And, you know, why would you ask, Linda, a total stranger something like that? That's very odd, right? And so, of course, his response was sort of brusquely and sort of like, who the heck are you? And he said, yes, I am. Why? And I said, here's an hour and a half. And in an instant, Linda, that man went from closed to totally open. That's the gift of what the horses do. They take us from being closed to being open and transparent and curious and non-judgmental. How many people do we have in our lives that are completely non-judgmental? And I'm talking about ourselves first. Let's not forget ourselves first.
Yes. Yes, always begins with ourselves first. You know, I when you're talking about children coming in there as well, what came up for me, I was wondering that, do you have children that possibly ADD, or as we label that, you know?
Yes. Lots of labels. The answer is yes, 1,000 times yes. I can maybe describe to you one of the more extreme examples of that frenetic activity. We have an inner city, as most cities do, and I had the privilege of joining with 3 young girls that came from the city, and their upbringing was very challenging. They were running drug money for their parents. They were dodging bullets. I'm talking every day they lived was fight or flight. And it has clearly affected their brains in a lot of serious ways in terms of reacting. They don't pause. There's no pause, Linda. There's something happens and they react. Because, you know, if you have somebody pointing a gun at you, yes, you're going to react. So enter the horses, and they begin to come out to the barn. And I noticed very quickly that they immediately, everything is done hastily. They can't stop moving, Linda. They can't stop moving. And so what I do with them is exactly the opposite. I woo them, and the horses woo them and urge them to slow down. Instead of how fast can you brush this horse, I want to see how slow can you go. Completely 180 degrees from anything they ever know. So they learn how to linger, how to slow down, how to be with their feelings. And I encourage them, when you're slowing down, because, you know, just because your body's slowing down, as you well know, it doesn't mean our mind is slowing down, right?
Exactly.
So we also have to be in that place where I say to them, spend time thinking loving thoughts about what you're doing. As you're brushing the horse on his shoulder, think about that beautiful shoulder. What a magnificent creation they are. I have a strong faith, strong believer in God, just because when I see creation, I just always brings me back to the Creator. I think there's definitely something out there that's a heck of a lot bigger than me, and I'm not it. You know what I mean? And so that attaches, it gives them a higher plane and vibration with which to live, if they're willing and open. Now, I will tell you, Linda, that sometimes, and these are the ones that break my heart, sometimes it's possible that these choices are too difficult. And in this case with these children, 2 of them were not able to make the choice with the horses because the darkness pulled them so deeply. And for me, that's always a lingering thing for me. I always wonder, what could I have done differently? Could I have done anything differently? And to make more of a difference in their lives.
Yeah, and I think in those kinds of cases, I think, you know, we know everyone's on their journey at their own pace, and we don't, it's good to tell what their journey, you know, we can't tell what their journey is. And I mean, what you've done has been planted the seed there, and now it's up to them to water that and make choices.
It is.
We know
it is. And, but, you know, I understand that, you know, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, I see how the horses have so transformed lives. And I'm just telling you, Linda, that for me, that's one of the, it reminds me of, I think it's Rilke. Be patient towards all that's unresolved in your heart and try to honor the questions themselves. That's the piece for me that lingers, the question, and clearly that my lens isn't one of, Mindy, you should have, because I do my best to not live in that world. But I think the fact that I will always wonder, I think that's a good thing, because that keeps things very fresh. And then the other thing, Linda, is when you've experienced that, when you see how these lives are transformed, it brings me into such a state of wonder and awe. And how many of us experience wonder and awe today? I mean, it's like it's a lost art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too busy. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, trying to make things happen. Yeah, absolutely. Which actually kind of, interesting enough, kind of brings me into, you talk about facilitating executives in leadership development. Now, that seems very different, but yet it's very much alike. So, I mean, here we go from...
Well, here's the deal. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad. Boy, you're asking all the right questions, Linda. So here's the deal. You take executives, okay, very, very left brain, right? They know their job. They know the numbers. They crunch the numbers. They know how to teach. They know how to lead, right?
Yeah.
But in that pursuit, that relentless, insatiable pursuit, I know that's a judgment call, but I'm going to say that, they lose the whole right side of their brain, those soft skills that we talked about, the listening, the noticing, and that's why, and not reacting, that's why horses are so great for leadership and executives and CEOs. They can work on team building with the horses. They can work on individual work. Because here's the deal. If you are a really powerful executive, you don't know you're powerful, Linda, because nobody ever overpowers you. So what that means is you go your merry way, and there's a word for it today. You know that big term, it begins with N, the narcissistic world. And nobody, there's no filters. You are just, you're just barreling your way through. Well, here's the deal. With 1,200 pounds, you don't barrel your way through. And the horses respond instantly to power when it's too predatory, and they shut down. So if you have an executive, it's fascinating. If you have an executive that is so out of touch with what's really going on inside, but he tries to come across as like, I'm all strong and this and that, the horses call you out so quickly. And by the way, it's not my job to say, oh, this is what's going on with you. What I do is I say, this is what I'm noticing the horse is doing, because sometimes they're not even noticing it. And then I'll ask questions, none of which I need an answer for. I'll ask questions like, how did you feel when he reacted like that? Did you feel like you had to be stronger? Did you feel like you were just going to give in? I mean, it's amazing how they are so attuned to the nonverbals in a way that if we notice it, it can lead to freedom.
I love that.
Gosh. I got another example. So I have so many examples. So I had two horses were eating hay in two different spots. And in a herd, one horse is more alpha than the other, right? It's just standard operating procedure. So this one horse wanted to go over and get the hay pile from the other horse. And he didn't, go stomping over there. He didn't go yelling and screaming. He didn't make a fit. He flicked his ear. He swished his tail. He walked towards the other horse. The other horse instantly moved away.
Oh, wow.
And then they went back to grazing. And here's the deal. The amazing thing, then you know what happened, Linda? They let go. They let go. They don't overreact. They only respond in the appropriate way. Think of conflict resolution just for a moment and applying it to that principle.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Amazing. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, you can get in touch with me. Go online, theresonanthorse.com. I do workshops. I do retreats. You can come here. But you know what? I do phone sessions and coaching sessions. I'm in the editing stages of my book, From Muck to Magnificence, How Cleaning Stalls Leads to an Astonishing Life. So we're in the editing stages of that. And check out my TEDx talk. Just go onto YouTube and put my name in.
I love it. I love it. We're going to have all that information on there, too. Now, do you have any specials on any workshops or retreats?
I have workshops coming up, and you know what, honey? If people want a session, and if people can come to a workshop, and if they say they heard me on your show, then of course they're going to get a special. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. That's all I need for them to do is call me and tell them they heard it on your show, and you better believe it. Of course, because we're, Linda, we want to change the world. The world needs help. And we're just a conduit. And like I said, sometimes when I have people that come, it's not what we're learning. It's what we're having almost to unlearn. And that's the gift.
Absolutely. Yes, I love it. I love it. Mindy, thank you so much
Linda, for spreading the word.
What you're doing.
Thank you, dear.
You're so welcome. Just a wealth of information, and just how beautiful and fascinating and amazing, and how our lives can shift in just being in the presence of horses. So
the gratitude is off the charts. Off the charts.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome. We want to thank all the listeners out there as well who joined us today. You want to be joining us via YouTube. We thank you so much. And you can also find her on YouTube, and we'll have all that information on the video as well. So please don't forget to follow, subscribe, comment, and like us. And you can join me next week, August 25th, for the next show. The Meaning to Happy Business is having clients you actually love with Allie Jean. So, Mindy, just such a beautiful, wonderful thing that you're doing, and your love and your passion comes through. It shows what you're doing.
It's all gift, Linda. Amazing. It's all gift. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
So much. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Fashion emergency hotline.
Help. I've got a hot date tonight, and I need to look amazing.
Just go to Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep, Old Navy's new Rockstar jeans have built-in sculpt to make your bod look va-va-voom.
Tell me more.
Right now, all jeans are on sale up to 50% off, including kids' jeans and new men's jeans with built-in flags.
50% off?
That's right. I think you and your jeans will be very happy together.
Jeans that sculpt at an incredible price? I think I'm in love. Thanks.
Don't thank me. Thank Old Navy. Valid 8/11 to 8/24. Select styles only.
With the LG Phoenix 2, you can always be your selfie. Its Gesture Shot feature makes it simple to snap candid selfies on its 5-megapixel front-facing camera.
Sunday, fun day, selfie.
Get it with AT&T Go Phone with unlimited talk, text, and data usage with the first 3 gigabytes at high speed for just $45 a month. All with no annual contract. AT&T, mobilizing your world. Phone restricted to Go Phone service for 6 months after activation. After first 3 gigabytes, data speeds are slowed to up to 128 kilobits per second for rest of term. See store for details.